wrong side of the pond. He is DJ Schweitzer. I am Jeremy Lance. What do you got in your glass?
Bourbon.
Elaborate.
I'm just drinking a little Weller Special Reserve, so my standard fare for the evening. I also have a can of Mountain Dew going in the other hand.
You're double fisting over
just
here.
double fisting, right? Just trying to get my uppers and downers in one. What about yourself?
You're just staying at one level then. You're just staying mid-range.
Yeah, just trying to equal each other out. Just not apply too much force in one direction.
I'm going with a little 1792 bourbon. So I'm like you. It's just a store pick from Party Source down in Kentucky. Before, back when I was able to get to Kentucky, before the bridges all died.
Yeah. If you're not fully aware of what's happening here in Cincinnati, Ohio, literally a bridge that everyone's been fighting about replacing for 20 years. Burst into flames about a month ago.
Not on its own accord. Two tractor trailers hit each other and exploded.
Yes, and it was.
I just want to clear that up, that the bridge did not spontaneously combust.
No, it's not in that bad a shape. And long story short, it shut down the major thoroughfare through the Cincinnati region. Interstate 75 and 71 are literally two of the most traversed highways in the entire country. And this bridge in particular is one of the most heavily trafficked in the country. And it's completely shut down, which, as you might expect, has caused pure pandemonium from a traffic sense. And getting across the river, which is a really commonplace thing here in Cincinnati, is extremely difficult now.
Oh yeah, I mean, when my parents lived here when we were growing up, my dad, we lived in Westchester, so that's northern suburbs of Cincinnati, and my dad worked in Florence, Kentucky, the entire time we lived here.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't imagine if he had to get to that commute was already an hour plus, and now add on to it just the nonsense rigmarole way that he has to get across the river now.
Yeah, it's outrageous. Our good buddy Nick Farmwald, my fellow Added Time Outfitters friend, his wife actually cuts hair for a living in Ohio, but they live in Covington, Kentucky. And, just getting across the river for her daily needs on what's really only a 6-mile trip total for them takes roughly an hour now, which, people in Chicago and LA are probably laughing at us only an hour to go 6 miles. But hey, that's why you live in this portion of the Midwest. Why we live here. So you don't have to deal with things like this.
I mean, that's even a Chicago or something like that. Listen, I like the fact that I can be downtown in 10 minutes from my house, and also I can circumnavigate downtown within, just literally a couple minutes, just be in and out of downtown if I needed to. And we like it that way. And that's why we live. That's literally one of the few good things geographically about living here. And that has been taken from us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people always say oh, Ohio, that must be terrible when you talk to someone from the coast. Oh man, that must not be great. And it's no way. I live within 60 minutes of 3 major cities, and I can get to all their downtowns within an hour drive of my house minimum. And I too live in the northern suburbs. So it's one of those things, you're right, that when that type of restriction on your movement, which is something that we're so used to here in this region, gets taken away from you, it literally it makes things a little tough. And for those of us who like to drink a little bit of bourbon, you do have to traverse the river sometimes to get some things that are extra fancy down in Kentucky.
So there's a few products that aren't sold on this side of the river, and then it's just you can actually have bourbon can actually be on sale in the state of Kentucky, whereas actually literally not a thing in Ohio.
Yeah,
it's just price always and forever.
Yeah, well, I mean, Kentucky, bourbon's pretty much just equivalent to water down there, right?
That's right.
More or less.
Just Heaven Hill Green Label, just pouring out of the faucets everywhere.
That's right. Absolutely. Just tap the ground and bourbon pours out of it for you. Well, let's get into this week's show because there's loads of soccer for us to get into. An exciting week, both in the Premier League as well over here in the domestic side of things. But before we get started with any of the actual soccer, let's get our way into everyone's favorite portion of the show, Fantasy Update. We have updates all around the table here at the top. Zach Horowitz's Team Horwitz, after 3 weeks on top, is unseated by Tyler Kelly's Ole Can't Drive. Great team name there for Tyler. I improved 10 places to 31st. You improved 5 places to 72nd. Positive weeks all around for everyone except for Zach Horwitz at the top of the table. So there is your fantasy update. And where should we start things off this week?
There's really only one place to start. I mean, listen, the last couple weeks, we really kind of hit on the fact that we have a lot of different contenders for the Premier League title this year, and one of them being Spurs. And for the third week in a row, I believe, we are starting the show off talking about top of the table Spurs. And this was one I know you talked about it last week. Like, this could have been another predictable, embarrassing banana peel for your Spurs side, but was not the case. Spurs handling their business in the North London derby against Arsenal. Arsenal, we'll get to them because it's not looking great there. But let's start with where it is looking good. Spurs look really good. Yeah, one of my first notes I put down here, Kane and Son are the new duo that are just owning the Premier League at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was looking at Premier League duos since the league's inception back in 1992, and I think the top scoring duo was Drogba and Lampard, and
yep.
it's like 36 goals or something between the two of them that they had set up for each other, and that was spanning their career together.
Right.
Right now, Son and Kane, and they've only been playing together, I think, 3 seasons, 4 max. They're now at 30. And the way that they are chugging out goals between each other right now is it's ridiculous the rate these two are performing at. And, man, I mean, it's just I feel like every week when we talk about this with Spurs being where they are in the table, it feels very unrealistic that this is happening at Tottenham. And particularly so when you consider the manager that we have and what everyone likes to consider his style. And I remember back at the beginning of the season or when he first took the appointment and Kane really struggled to score, there was this talk about can Kane succeed in a Mourinho system? And I thought about that today as we were getting ready to prepare, and I was like, man, what a weird and quick transition to that not even being a talking point any longer. Not only is Kane thriving, but another player in this setup is also thriving, and literally no one can stop them right now.
So the common variable in what we're talking about though is then Jose, right? Because he was also the manager for the lion's share of Drogba and Lampard too.
Yeah, which is wild, and I think back when those points were being made, can Kane succeed in this system?
Yeah, I didn't get that at all when people were throwing that out. I'm like, what?
That was always the counterpoint.
15 years. What are you talking about?
I mean, exactly. Drogba and Lampard became the legends that they are now as players during that exact spell. So
yeah.
To say that he's not capable of making kingmakers of attacking players is just a ridiculous concept.
Yeah, that's an absurd statement.
And they're already proving that again. Kane now the all-time top scorer in North London derby history with 11 goals. I was kind of shocked to see Thierry Henry only has 5.
I was gonna say and I'm sure he just surpassed Henry.
Nah, Adebayor was I think the player that he just surpassed to reach that.
That's not fair.
Yeah, he played on both sides.
I was gonna say, yeah, he cheated.
Yeah, but that's Adebayor. But yeah, I mean, just for a guy that so many were concerned wouldn't be able to produce under Mourinho. Silly concept, guys. Anytime you've questioned whether Kane can do it, he does it. The one thing I am going to say while we're on the topic of Kane, and I think it's worth pointing out, everyone has really kind of spotlighted this thing where when balls are played in the air towards him and he undercuts the defender who's going up to challenge for that aerial challenge, and he kind of sells it like the guy's jumping over his back and he's getting fouled. But what Kane's actually doing is he's backing into players while they're in the air. And while he sells it great, I'm not going to be a homer in this situation. I want the Premier League and the referees to really start hammering him on this. Someone is going to get stupidly hurt at some point when he backs, and they're going to fall and break their neck in a way that, like, someone is not going to be able to walk any longer, let alone potentially live. And I love Kane as a player, but man, I do wish the referees would pay closer attention to it so that someone doesn't get hurt, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, so someone's ultimately going to be falling on their head at some point. So they're flying. They look great. I guess they've passed several tests already this season, and I think that's the big thing. I think we talked about it last week, how we were both kind of giving our resumes for our club, and I think where Chelsea would fall short in that category is that Spurs have actually passed some pretty tough tests this season where other clubs have not.
Yeah. Back at the performances that Spurs have had so far this campaign, they've passed a lot of these tests, right? And really, looking back towards the beginning of the season is really the only time where you can start to maybe question where they sit within this whole pecking order for this year, right? They've beaten Manchester City. They've now handily beaten Arsenal. They've come up against
United.
Yeah, right. The only team that they really struggled at all against was Liverpool, and that was so early on in the campaign.
Right.
That I'm just, they hadn't gotten their feet underneath them yet. So I feel like when they meet again, and knowing how it'll be with Spurs, they'll probably get pantsed by Liverpool on that occasion. But they have passed a lot of these tests in a way that it's very unnatural for them to be doing that. And you mentioned at the beginning of this segment, this seemed the perfect setup for the banana peel. And we talked last week about what I would need to see Spurs do to actually consider them a real contender. And I said this match needed to be them proving that this isn't a banana peel for them, that they can win these matches and not be that Spursy club we've gotten so used to. And they not only did that, but they did that resoundingly so this weekend.
On the other side of the coin, or the ball, or the pitch, or whatever you want to use here, Arsenal, we talked about this some last week, that it was starting to look that there was some serious issues going on. And I feel like it was really magnified in this match in a lot of ways. And a lot of it coming down to really how the manager has been going about things in Arteta, where, Arteta looked like he was trying a little too hard about certain things, and he was holding on to certain things. This match, and I'll let you tactically explain this a little more, but like even the most basic layman knowledge was required to watch this match and go, wow, this team is like just crossing the ball in, and that's not working, and they don't seem to have a backup plan.
Yeah, it's been something we talked about last week even, and Arteta said as much in the press. Numerically, you sling in enough crosses, you're bound to get goals. Like, that's what's going to happen. And yeah, if you look at statistics,
they tried to this week.
Yeah, you look at statistics across the sport, you're right. Like, statistically, you swing in more crosses, you're more likely to score goals. But that also is predicated on like a number of factors, right? That you have someone who's capable of finishing off chances with their head. And I think it was like something like Aubameyang's only had, of 74 chances that have slung in his direction, only 6 of them has he headed in the direction of the goal. And if you've got a guy, and he's clearly a speed technical player, right? Like he needs to be playing with the ball at his feet, not the ball at his head. He's not a guy of great stature. He's not a guy who's a fox in the box. He's not a guy who's going to pounce on a great service slung in from a channel. He is there to create opportunities, to carve opportunities out of attacking flows. That's not the way that Arsenal are playing right now.
So should they just like switch it out and put Lacazette up top and just like it? I feel like, I mean, Aubameyang is pretty much been their best player for the past several seasons, right? I mean, top goal scorer or thereabouts for a while now, year after year. Do you not try to tailor something to that he's actually going to be effective in?
I mean, you would imagine that would be the tactic you would choose, but no, that's not what they're doing. And furthermore, even if they did put Lacazette up there, he's kind of the same type of player. So it's not at least when he plays centrally. So when you see Arsenal continuously try to work into these wide positions, that's fine to do. You see lots of teams, even Spurs, look to get into these wide positions, but they do that as a manner to try to stretch the defense to open up other areas centrally for maybe players to run onto. Arsenal aren't doing that. They're trying to work it into a wide position so they can then sling it in like you were talking about and try to work in those crosses. And they just aren't built as a squad to do that. It's like they have Giroud still playing up top for them, or still have a Van Persie or someone of that caliber who has some stature and some headed finishing ability. But neither of those players have played for the club in ages, or a Nicholas Bentner even, an Adebayor even. But they don't have players like that right now. They have skillful, creative attackers. And for whatever reason, Mikel Arteta is clearly lost in the idea that this is the way he needs to play. And for a guy who's been hailed as like this, Guardiola protege, he looks like the poorest man's Guardiola, like a guy who rates himself tactically, but absolutely has no clue what he's doing.
So where do they go from here? Like, where do they go from here?
I don't know. And for, you talk to some of the Arsenal fans out there, I think the tide has turned where they're kind of like, this guy maybe isn't the answer. And that feels fast. Like it feels faster than it needs to be. He's not had a ton of time there. But when he's had an opportunity to build a little bit of the squad out and he continues to play in a manner that doesn't suit it, you really wonder, like, what is this the guy that we should be giving the keys to the car to?
Yeah. But I mean, is that what they're going to have to do though? Like, I mean, is Arsenal going to have to dump a manager again already?
Are they going to have to? Probably. Like, it doesn't look good for Arteta at this point.
I mean, it's like we're watching United all over again, right? Like, United finally don't have that legendary manager, and they just keep bringing in that next guy that's going to be the new legacy maker, and it doesn't happen. And we saw that happen for United for years, still possibly technically happening for United, 7 years on. Is that what Arsenal is now going to be in that rut? Like, I mean, I guess they're in the rut right now, right? They're in the rut of like, this is now our king. Oh no, he sucks. This is now our king that's going to create our legacy and our entity. No, he's no good. Is that what we're now doing?
I don't know. I mean, I think the parallel to Manchester United is a good one, right? Storied club with, this manager of legendary stature leaves, and how do you fix and get back on track after having such a large hole pulled out of your dam. And I think it's always going to be difficult to do that. I think where it's slightly different is that with United, like there's been a consistency in how they've approached things since Sir Alex left. Sir Alex did everything, right? And he worked with Ed Woodward to make things after the Glazers came through. And then as he's left, the new manager that's come in has been given all those same responsibilities on the technical side as well as the tactical and coaching side of things. So at least once Emery left, they realized like, hey, we need a technical director who's going to come in and help manage this situation, so that we're not trying to put too much ask on one coach to come in here and fill the hole that was Arsene Wenger. And so they went out and brought in another club legend in Edu, and I feel like he's like not even on everyone's radar right now. Everyone's solely focused in on Arteta, and I don't know. I think they have a better setup to succeed. Whether Edu and Arteta are the right answers to do that, at least Arsenal have realized like, hey, we need to remove the football decision-making responsibilities from the business ones, and we've given a soccer person that role. Whereas United still have Ed Woodward, who's kind of living in that role as the general manager or technical director when he clearly has no clue what he's doing. But whether Edu and Arteta are the guys to actually pull them out of this, I'm convinced at this point.
Last question on the matter. Will Mesut Ozil ever play for Arsenal again?
Seems unlikely, but if that means he continues to roast Piers Morgan on Twitter in the process, I'm totally cool. Like, since he's not been playing as much, Piers, who's a admitted Arsenal supporter, has been constantly like, they've been biting at each other on Twitter, and every time Ozil just like scorches him, and that's what Pierce is in the business of getting done to him. But no, I don't think he's ever going to see the pitch for him ever again.
Well, excited to see him with DC United next year.
More than likely.
Let's whip around the rest of the Premier League. We just talked about him, United, and we have to start there for the second week in a row. And obviously things didn't go as well today as we record on a Tuesday night. For the second week in a row, they pull out a W, get the comeback win, and Ole lives to fight another day despite a not so hot first half. But there's United like right there, and you look at the standings now, and they're right there.
Yeah, I mean, they're sitting in sixth place, not far back points-wise. This is their fifth consecutive victory away from home in the Premier League, which is an amazing feat considering they're actually kind of garbage at home. And you say Ole lives to fight another day, and then he has another major setback, such as he had tonight in the Champions League when they crashed out of the competition. So I just... They're a club that can't seem to get their entire act together under Ole, right? Like they seem to do well in one area, but then when they do that, they falter in another. And maybe they're climbing back to their former heights, but I still, much like I am with Arteta, I remain unconvinced that Ole is actually capable of being the guy who gets them up that mountain.
City with another pretty easy win as they hosted Fulham. That was 2-0. That just could have been so much more. Everton struggled to get a draw against Burnley, a Burnley side who is not good and looking to possibly be going down. Everton continuing to really find their feet again. I mean, they were flying so high there at the beginning of the season, and now it's just, I'm not really sure what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough run of form for them. Only one win in their last 5. 3 of those have been losses. This draw against Burnley, who have struggled for results, struggled for goals this season. Only 5 goals so far this campaign for Burnley, and one of them comes against an Everton side who, at the beginning of the campaign, really held themselves pretty airtight. But now continuing to struggle to score. themselves, although Calvert-Lewin was on the score sheet again, and giving up one to a pretty impotent side themselves. I think we have well and truly seen Everton return to the mean, and I think they're going to give plenty of teams trouble still this season. But I think they're going to be focusing on, hey, can we actually keep ourselves in this Champions League fight? And even looking at where things stand now with that ridiculously hot start, they are 4 points out of that race, and that doesn't seem like much. But we're only 11 matches into the season, and that's a pretty big gap for a club that can't really find.
In the big contested reunion meetup of two rivals from the championship level, and Frank Lampard and Bielsa, it was Chelsea getting a very hard fought 3-1 win over a rival of sorts that they had not gotten a chance to play in quite some time in a meaningful match. So this was a match that was between a big powerhouse in the title race and a promoted side, but it had so much more of an atmosphere and a feel, especially with those 2,000 fans, some of which sitting way too close to each other. It had such a better buzz and feel of like two heavyweights going at it. There just seemed like a lot more on the line in this match.
Yeah, it totally did. This match was wildly entertaining to watch as a neutral, as you kind of expected it to be with the way Lampard and Bielsa like to set up their sides. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned having the 2,000 fans in the stadium, and you mentioned that they were too close. This is not something that's restricted to Chelsea as well. It was great to have fans back. Like, whether or not you think they should be there or whether morally they should be, the answer to that is probably no. But even if you set that aside, it was kind of cool to get to see the emotional side of that with fans in the stadium and how loud 2,000 fans can seem, especially in some of these big cavernous grounds. Like Liverpool, when they hosted this weekend, that was the first time their fans had watched them play since they'd won the title, which is just a wild concept to think. And the emotion pumping out of the supporters was pretty cool to see in pretty much every situation. There were some limited ones where it was actually terrible, and we'll get to that later in the show.
Yeah, that might make an appearance later.
Yeah. But that said, if we're gonna let him in, we gotta at least make him enforce.
You got a 40,000 seat stadium, and you only got 2,000 people there. You think you could spread them out a little better? Like they would do some shots, and like, okay, those people are spread out, and then they would do like another shot, like close up with the fans. I'm like, that's like 14 people just sitting, like just filling up that row. Like what?
The number of fans not wearing their masks or wearing them improperly, and it's why people shouldn't be in the stadium. Like, right? Like, all of the tensions aside, we knew this would happen.
Yeah, exactly right. Because like in a perfect world, you could tell 2,000 fans, hey, here are the rules to keep everybody safe. We got all these protocols in place. This should work fine. And I think that largely the science is out there that if you do all like the measures of keeping distance and wearing a mask in an outdoor environment, you're probably going to be okay. Mm-hmm. But when you don't follow those simple rules of wearing the mask all the way on your face or wearing it at all or not sitting in big clusters of people, I mean, they did have some rules that didn't make sense. They said people couldn't stand. I'd like to see the study on what standing has to do as opposed to sitting. I'm pretty sure people's mouths and nose work roughly the same way between sitting and standing.
If I had to guess, it probably has something to do with, like, as you stand up, it allows you to project things further. Like,
well, I mean, they did put that in there though, right? Like, no singing and yelling. Yeah. Which obviously that was like, why are you writing this down? You know they're not going to listen. Yeah. Why else are they showing up?
Like, if you're going to put them in there, you may as well let them do that, which, again, maybe you shouldn't be letting them in there if you really don't want people to be singing in stadiums. But regardless, it was great to have them back in there for that, and in particular in this match where there's just so much history. And for those who aren't familiar with, the older history of the Premier League, this was a huge battle, huge rivalry, especially in the early days of the league.
Yeah, a lot of there's a decent bit of chants that Chelsea loved to sing, and several of them were about Leeds.
Yeah. But with the victory, Chelsea keeping pace, still just 2 points off the top of Spurs, so they continue to fly high as well. Moving on, Liverpool also keeping pace, still level on points with Spurs, behind in the goal differential. They erased some of that, battering Wolves 4-0 in what was supposed to be the marquee match, or at least from the later perspective this weekend. And I was secretly hoping, hey, Wolves, maybe you'll do us a little bit of a favor here and, punch a bit above and maybe hold them back. But Liverpool resoundingly punching the Wolves back into place and kind of reestablishing that pecking order. Liverpool, despite being title holders, I feel like for whatever reason, nobody's really talking about them. Like and maybe this is my tunnel vision on my teams like getting a lot of attention right now.
No, I agree. Although I guess I could have the same tunnel vision, but I totally agree.
And
I wonder if it's something to the fact that like them achieving and winning and playing well like is expected. So like they're expected to be in this title race, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where a Spurs or this young Chelsea side are not exactly expected to be in the title race. Even City, to an extent, is expected to be in the title race.
Right. And, they aren't exactly in it at the moment, but
they're not.
But City and United now nipping right into that top four discussion as well. And look, it's a young season, and yeah, they're 6 points and 5 points back respectively, but they're not out of this either. So I think we have a lot of season ahead of us, and I think even sides like City and United, while they may not be in the direct title challenge conversation, I think they're going to have a big impact on who actually does end up winning the title.
Other matches over on Sunday, Crystal Palace just absolutely destroying West Brom. That was kind of a wild one to see. And then Leicester City getting a win over Sheffield United. Sheffield United, man, thought they had a point. Thought they were going to have a point, and literally in the last seconds of the match, Jamie Vardy gets loose with the ball, and game over.
Just, you can't let that guy loose in that type of situation. He is going to punish you. As soon as he broke free, you immediately knew, like, nope, they're done. They're done here.
Yeah. Southampton gets the win over Brighton Hove Albion. That's your weekend in the Premier League. I think next week starts the true holiday grind of like teams playing basically every 4 days.
Yeah, it's really going to get chaotic here over the coming weeks. I'm intrigued to see how the Premier League is able to manage the COVID situation during this extremely busy period. They've done a great job, despite seeing a small spike in cases over the last month.
And luckily, a lot of their managers are old enough to where they're in that phase 1 of vaccines, so they should be getting those. Like Roy Hodgson's probably got his today.
He's probably had several of them.
Yeah, he's already had the second round.
Yeah, good for Roy though. Glad to hear he's protected. Let's stay in Europe before we move over on the domestic side of things. It was an absolutely wild match day today, both in a result sense and in what transpired on the field sense.
Yeah. Let's get the results out of the way. And then we'll get to the meat and potatoes of what happened today. You had some pretty wild results. We kind of already talked about it a bit, but Manchester United bowing out, and they bowed out after RP Leipzig dropped a 3 spot on them. They come back, and actually it looked like we were going to get another United, great escape here at the end for the third match in a row from them, because they only needed a draw essentially to get them on to the next round, and they claw back 2 goals pretty late, a thrilling one, and that ends 3-2. Other matches in Barcelona Juventus, so we got it's Messi versus Ronaldo. There really wasn't a whole lot on the line in this match, I don't believe, but it was just 2 powerhouses, the 2 biggest names in the sport. But we also had a better moment within that, which was Weston McKennie with just an absolute fantastic goal, his second in like 5 days.
Yeah, great to see Weston just continuing to blossom in this role with Juve. Being a star in this match is hard to do, considering who he was lining up alongside. And it's funny to think this may be one of the last times we ever get to see Ronaldo and Messi stepping onto the same pitch together.
Yeah.
Given their respective ages, but there wasn't a whole lot on the line. I think Juve would have had to win 9-0 for them to actually top the group. But too, Weston was in this match. He had the wonder goal. Serginho Dest also started in this match as well. So 2 Americans playing in this high key, match between 2 powerhouses and getting good showings at that. That's just, oh man, it's such a cool moment. And, to think that Weston McKennie would be the star of the show in a game featuring Messi and Ronaldo is kind of hard to imagine, but here we are.
Other matches that were kind of crazy. It wasn't really like a crazy one, but like the Sevilla that we thought was going to be there, that was going to be just really good and giving Chelsea a real run for their money, showed up today against Rennes. Like they played really well. That was a fun watch. Ultimately, though, we do need to get to the other thing that happened. There is actually one result that's not a result. There was one match postponed, and not for the reason match has been postponed lately, before a much more troubling issue, and that is PSG's match against, and I'm gonna blow this name, so I'm gonna make you say, is it Basa Kahir?
Basak Sahir, I think is what it is.
Okay.
But I probably got it wrong too.
Demba Ba's club, the club, not the one that he owns in San Diego, but the one he currently plays for. Their match was postponed because I think this was was it before halftime or was it after halftime?
It was well before halftime.
Okay.
Only in the 24th minute where things finally kind of got going and halted. But the match was unfolding at this point. And long story short, there was an incident on the sideline involving the 4th official speaking towards the bench of the Istanbul-based club, who we're not going to say their name. And
because the 4th official was basically trying to say that someone was needing to be to stop yelling, or to they were basically saying one of the coaches was running afoul of whatever situation. Was he communicating to the ref that hey, you need to card this guy? Is that where the conversation happened?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what the exact complaint was from the bench towards the 4th official, but regardless of what the complaint was, that's ridiculously commonplace, right?
Assistants get tossed in matches all the time.
Oh man, the 4th official it's a tough gig, right? They're basically sitting there just taking the constant abuse of dissatisfaction of what the refereeing crew is doing, and it's not easy to say, or it's pretty easy to say it's a thankless job, but two, these are the guys, they're often out there running centers themselves, they're often out there running lines themselves, so they're well versed in how to deal with these type of situations. But this fourth official had the gall to turn back around and address a black coach allegedly address a black coach on this team's bench with the N-word. And
Basically referring to what I gathered was he was. So that's why I thought he was talking to the ref of like, hey, you need to card this assistant. Which assistant? And then that was how he pointed out which assistant he was talking about or something.
Yeah, and maybe that was the way it unfolded. The video I watched is kind of confusing of it. And given it's so difficult to actually watch a live match right now.
Yeah.
Unless you want to pony up for CBS All Access. But regardless of the situation, you can hear it in one of the videos. Like you can clearly hear it. Now you can also hear the coach say back, you can't say that word. But fact of the matter is it is audible to be heard. Someone is saying it, and like mayhem breaks loose at this point, right? Demba Ba like dressing down the fourth official.
That's a great video. Go watch that one.
Oh, it's totally like, not that I didn't have respect for Demba Ba because he seemed like a pretty great guy to begin with.
Love that man.
But like my respect level for him grew for the reason and the way he was addressing the refereeing crew. But what was greatest about this is that the Istanbul team very quickly decided, like, we're not continuing this.
We're done.
Yeah, we're done. And truly, like, what we've been like, it's a watershed moment essentially in the sport. We saw the other team go, "We are with you," and they walked off with them. Now, this is a unique circumstance in that normally it's a player or a coach or a fan abusing another team's player, right, or coach or whomever. This is like a referee, a neutral party abusing one of the players or one of the members of the coaching staff. And so it's a little bit different dynamic than what we're used to seeing. But like seeing a guy like Kylian Mbappe being like, guys, no, we are off with them. Like he was rallying the troops to be like, we are done with this match. Like we are not continue playing. And
well, you can see even from the video, like a guy like Neymar gets into the conversation real quickly and is talking with everybody, and he seems like he is super concerned, and you can see him yelling at the fourth official. But you're right. Like we have seen, I mean, just in the past year. Remember this scene? I believe it was in France, in Lyon, where you had a player, a black player, take abuse from people in the stands, and then said, "I'm leaving," and his own team was like mad at him and trying to like force him to stay on. I think he even got like carded for some reason in all of that. Yep. Like we saw everything we didn't want to happen. So many times now. And this was that first moment where the other team was instantly like, yeah, no, we're with you. Let's go. We're out of here.
And the solidarity of it was really cool to see. And it's easy to point out how poorly this was handled by the refereeing crew and by UEFA, probably behind the scenes to an extent as well. But their original solution was like, hey, fine. If you guys won't come back out if this guy's involved, then we'll send him to the VAR truck and we'll bring that guy out and he'll be the fourth official. And it's kind of like, wait. This guy who's being accused of racism, you're going to go throw him in a booth that's literally rife for abuse from a guy who might have been
giving him more power. I mean, the VAR ref has more power than the fourth official in the way that the game is currently constructed.
It was just a bonkers solution.
The best within all of that is that solution was actually horribly flawed because UEFA guideline says that there actually has to be two people in that booth. And they were like, oh yeah, I guess that doesn't work that way.
No, apparently not. So yeah, just a really low point for the competition, but it really underlines, and I tweeted this out. How many years ago was it that Sepp Blatter said like there is no more racism in football?
Yeah.
And you just kind
Mission
of go
accomplished
like,
banner. I think he flew in on a jet and then like landed right there on the aircraft carrier. It was like mission accomplished. Racism's over.
yeah, it doesn't exist here anymore. And man, this weekend and this week in particular has just really undermined that entire ideology. And if anyone thinks this isn't still a problem, well, hopefully this weekend and week have dispelled that notion.
Let's go stateside. Let's talk about brighter things and what's more brighter to talk about than dude, this MLS playoffs has been so good, and we were treated to a pretty good Eastern Conference final. Two teams just going for it. Two teams that had their game plan and stuck to it, and ultimately Columbus's game plan worked out the better. But on Monday night, we were treated to once again another wild finish in these playoffs.
Oh man, the Seattle Minnesota match in the Western Conference Final was the treat of what has been an absolutely treat-full playoff season this year in 2020. So obviously Seattle end up winning the match 3-2. We saw Minnesota go up 2-0 in this match, and they really looked like they had figured out a way to halt Seattle's attack, and for a
and
little
even
bit
Seattle,
of the match,
Seattle just looked like they were there was that look of just the wind out of their sails there after that second goal went in.
Oh yeah, and it wasn't just their sales at that point. I'm sure MLS's league office, having watched Columbus qualify in the eastern half of things, and then watching Minnesota potentially fill the other half of that void, they definitely were like, this is not the final we were looking for. We didn't get one of our marquee clubs out of there, and that's why I was absolutely gobsmacked that when later in the match a clear Seattle penalty opportunity was VAR'd away when just a very rare example of VAR getting it completely wrong in MLS. It's odd over in England. It's almost constantly wrong, whereas here it's almost constantly right. And normally in these situations you'd expect like, oh, Seattle will get a little bit of benefit of the doubt here. They totally got hosed in this situation, but luckily karma was on their side, and Rui Diaz punched one in injury time. Just a truly amazing finish, not to mention the whole 90 minutes was great as well.
Well, I mean, even I feel like Seattle scores that first goal, and already you're like, oh no. I mean, in the way that the game was being played at that moment, and because of the history of Seattle being the defending champion and a team that's been to so many finals recently, and Minnesota kind of having this the plucky new club that's finally got their feet under them and having a great season, and you're like, Seattle is like this that villain in like a horror movie, and you're like, oh my gosh, just when you thought they were dead, they just showed a bit of life. They're gonna kill you now. You just let them off the mat. You're gonna die. And the moment that went in, I was like, oh god, they're gonna do this.
Oh yeah, it was like that feeling when New York started going on the offensive in the Open Cup here a couple years ago when FCC went up.
Yeah.
And you kind of knew as soon as that goal went in, you're like, this game is toast. And it was the exact same type of situation here. Once Seattle grabbed that first, you could feel a second coming. And then when that second came, I tweeted out Minnesota probably aren't going to get out of this injury time, and they didn't.
Yeah, when that second one went in, I felt like Minnesota is so just spun right now there's no way they survived the next couple of minutes.
Mm-mm.
And they did. And it was a wild finish. It was a crazy finish. Sad for Minnesota. What a great season. Hopefully it's something they can really build off of. But here he is, Seattle in MLS Cup once again. And they are officially, the juggernaut of this league right now. They are the Galaxy from years back.
Even if they don't win, I think it's fair to call this a bit of a dynastic team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like two titles in 3 seasons. This is their 4th final, in a row? Is that right? I'm probably getting that wrong.
But I think it's their. It's 4 of the last 5.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
because you had Atlanta, Portland.
Yeah, that's right. But regardless, they are consistently finding themselves in this position. By the way, I will be shocked if they don't re-sign Brian Schmetzer, their head coach, who is out of contract somehow at the end of this season. But I also, if they decide to go a different direction, I don't think that's going to be as big of a problem as everyone seems to think it's going to be. Everyone also got a little freaked out about Siggy Schmidt stepping away from the equation. And Brian Schmetzer stepped in and gave them that title they've been looking for. So I have a pretty high level of confidence in Gareth Lagerwey's ability to navigate this franchise the way he has. But I also give Brian Schmetzer a contract. The guy clearly deserves it, and the run that he has this team on is truly one of the best in MLS history. You mentioned the Galaxy from the early 2000s. I would also throw DC United from the early years of the league as well into the conversation for one of the best dynasties this league has ever produced.
What if they don't, and he ends up Toronto ends up scooping him up?
That would probably be probably the worst place for him to end up as far as a Seattle perspective.
Oh yeah,
it's another club that kind of has a good head on its shoulders as far as their approach. Obviously, they have a coaching vacancy right now, and I guarantee you that if he doesn't land in Seattle, he's going to probably land in Toronto.
That would spice up that. I mean, already kind of like a built-in rivalry since they've played each other 3 times now in the MLS Cup. That would create some wild moments ahead. But yeah, I would imagine. I just don't think Seattle would do that, right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that happened in the NHL just 2 seasons ago. Washington Capitals go all the way and win, and and their manager or their head coach is just tossed in the offseason.
Yeah. Vicente Del Bosque getting canned at Real Madrid after winning the Champions League. It's not unheard of. And he wouldn't necessarily be getting canned, but maybe
not renewed.
Price tag's higher than they would have liked. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they continue to put up results and find themselves 90 minutes away potentially from hoisting a 3rd title in 4 seasons, which is just a ridiculous run of form, given the way that MLS is structured to basically create parity.
So it's Seattle versus Columbus. Columbus, a team that, I mean, early on, especially, we go back to MLS's back tournament Cuppity Cup. I think we were all saying it dude, this Columbus team is built so well.
Oh, totally. In fact, when they got knocked out in that tournament, it was a bit of an upset. And arguably, Portland had a pretty damn good tournament as well. But Columbus had probably had the best results of the tournament prior to that point. They were dominant in the group stage. And I'm not at all surprised to see them in the final. And what's really cool is to see, and everyone's harped about this, but going from Save the Crew to this whole Savor the Crew moment where 2 years ago we weren't even sure this team would be around any longer, and now they're back fighting for an MLS Cup for the second time in 5 years, or excuse me, 6 years, and and getting to host it in their own building in the last year this Columbus Crew Stadium, Mafre Stadium, will be an MLS venue is just an
Right.
amazing storyline.
Yeah, no, it sets up for a really cool kind of storybook ending to that saga, right? Just when you thought that the storybook ending was them getting saved, it's the fact that they reached the mountaintop only 24 months later, basically. Here's a question for you though, with the Crew, and I think it's one that I've seen a few people throw out there, but like Alex Tarbell's played really well in goal. Logically, Room will be out of COVID protocol by this weekend. Who do you start? Do you start the hot hand that's got you there?
Yeah, I mean, and Room was fantastic in the playoffs
Yeah.
prior to his COVID episode, right? So it is a truly, it's the type of problem you like to have as a coach. But it also will be one that if you make the wrong choice and one of those guys makes a goof, you'll never hear the end of it. Now, Caleb Porter doesn't exactly, come off to me as the type of guy who gives a damn about what people think. So he'll probably be pretty confident in his choice, but it will certainly be a hard one to make. And, an interesting storyline to watch ahead of this weekend's final.
Yeah, it'll be real fun. I mean, two managers, like any good manager in MLS, operates as if they've just had somebody piss in their punch. So
Yep.
that'll be a bowl of fun. Thoughts and prayers to whoever has to do the interview at the end of the match with either winner or loser.
No.
There won't. I mean, there will be a few fans at this match. Not again diving into the is that right or wrong scientifically or ethically. But I feel like it does really suck that we're missing out on fans not fully being in the stadium, because this is two fan bases that, like, I mean, like literally the fans in the seats have a history of not getting along.
Oh man, like for teams that have no natural like geographic like rivalry aspect to it, you wouldn't really. Well, I say this like it's Columbus fans clearly hate Seattle fans. I don't know enough Seattle fans to know if it's like a two-directional hate, right? Or if it's just like Seattle just doesn't even really care or know that Columbus exists. And I can totally see it being that way.
Yeah, I think Seattle lives in their Cascadia bubble with their rivalries up there, and that's what matters. And then, yeah, you got like the LA teams. That's a big deal too. But I think for Crew fans, I think, everybody in MLS views the Sounders as the, we always joke that they invented soccer, right? They invented atmosphere. They invented fan support. That's the kind of the joke. But for Crew supporters who have been there since the beginning of the league and are kind of just not saying that they don't have passion, but just like being a supporter is kind of old hat, and it's kind of something that they, I don't want to say like do in a more mature way, but like they've collectively as a group kind of have moved a little bit past the pageantry of how some of the Sounders supporters operate. And obviously that was kind of the crux of one of the big issues that they had with one another back in 2013 when USA Mexico was going to be hosted at Crew Stadium, and all of a sudden the Seattle contingency was like, hey, Capos, that's what we do. We're going to come there and American Outlaws are going to have us run things.
Yeah, and to be fair, that was American Outlaws making that call, not necessarily the Sounders supporters, although how different those two population groups are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it shows the two different ways of support, right? Like Seattle is all about like we have capos and we all do this thing as one. And the Crew supporters, for better or worse, aren't that way.
Right. They're very organic.
And there's some back to that, right? Like, I mean, they go back to the last time that they were in MLS Cup and they were hosting, and the supporters groups couldn't get on the same page of like how we are cheering for this team, and they were out sung and out chanted by the away supporters.
Yeah, so at least the Crew fans won't have that to worry about this time around. Limited supply, whoever may be there. I'm bummed about this a little bit. I've never missed an MLS Cup final at Crew Stadium, both in the ones they hosted earlier on when the Crew were not involved, as well as the last time out I covered Crew Portland when it was here last. I'm sad that I'm not going to be going to this match. I was offered an opportunity to apply as media to go up for it, and it's one of those things like I don't think we should be going. And despite the fact that MLS Cup is going to be 90 minutes up the road from my house, it makes more sense for me to stay at home and watch this and take things in a way that's healthier for everyone. And I'm not gonna fault anyone who does make the trip there. I get what they're doing. I understand their motivations and needs to do that. But it is a shame that that's the situation that we're in, and no one's to blame necessarily. But it's unfortunate. And given the storyline of what we've seen with the Crew, you would have wanted there to be fans there, at least to experience, be it sadness or joy, to see that type of finale in a stadium that's played such a tremendous role in American soccer's history over the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah. It'll be exciting. I can't wait for the final. I don't know. I always get really excited for it. Winners and wankers?
I think that's the part of the show we're at.
Let's go with our wankers first. I think we can pull this off this time without having to reverse engineer what we already had reverse engineered. My wanker, and I think probably your wanker, judging by earlier conversations, Millwall supporters group.
I actually gave it to the club as well. So why don't you do the supporters, and then I'll pick up for the club.
So obviously it came out, the video was circulated around all social media when fans were allowed back for the first Millwall match this past weekend against, I believe they're playing Derby County. As has been custom for some time now, pretty much ever since leagues restarted at the end of last season, players and managers and staff and refs all take a knee at the beginning of the match. And that's been something that's very customary, and it's like that's what we're doing. And obviously then that happened at the Millwall match, but for the first time since it started to happen, there were actually Millwall match supporters there. And they booed it. They booed the kneeling. And it was a bad moment. It was a moment you're like, oh man, I kind of regret fans are here now.
Yeah. And then just when you think they can't make it any worse, they went and put out arguably the worst PR statement of all time.
A two-page rambling mess where they basically said, and you could see, if you went through the social media of like accounts, like big accounts like Sky Sports and the like that had tweeted the original, clip of the booing. Millwall supporters, hey, credit them to a man, all seem to be in unison about it, that we were booing because we just feel like this has just kind of been played out, and this has gone on too long, and we got to move on. And that's essentially what that 2-page rambling mess from the Millwall supporters, where they're like quoting people, like, see, this guy agrees with us. Here's this out of context quote from them, and just basically saying like, yeah, we just think it's time to just be done with this and move on, which is a super privileged and convenient thing to be able to say.
Yeah, they were like, we're not racist. We're tired of hearing about this. And it's like, so we're
not racist. Then. We're not racist. We just don't want to address racism.
Right. Which is a pretty rich comment, because if you know anything about Millwall's history,
they're the worst.
Racism and offensiveness is kind of like their thing. And at least the supporters.
Assault is also their thing.
Yeah, assault is definitely their thing.
Green Street Hooligans was a documentary.
More or less. Here's the other thing, and why I'm actually giving it to the club. It's unfair sometimes. Millwall, the club, sometimes get a raw deal because their supporters are so terrible. But Millwall, the club, also has a really bad track record of dealing with their terrible supporters. And this is a perfect example of why. So in a normal situation where a club supporters come out and do something as atrocious as this, the club would come out and condemn it, which they did.
Yeah.
The problem is their response going into their next set of fixtures, which were today, was that, hey, we're actually not going to have our players kneel. We're going to have them join arms with the opposing team, and that will address this problem, showing unity with it. And to be fair, several of their players did still kneel when they came out today, and they were applauded. And I didn't hear any boos in the video I saw, but by their own fans.
QPR celebrated their goals by kneeling.
Yeah, which is amazing. But the problem is that in doing so, Millwall have basically appeased their racist fans.
Yeah, that's what the fans wanted.
They didn't want to do it anymore, and they literally did what they didn't want anymore. And it's just, you want to be like, oh, Millwall, the club, don't deserve it. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. They enable this behavior from their fan base. They could clearly say, we're done with you guys. They could do it. And you know what? They would be fine. They fear that they wouldn't be, but I have a feeling they would be. And I imagine they would win themselves a lot more respect and probably more fans if they'd turn their back on this segment of their fan base.
Yeah, certainly more global respect and global support would come from that. When you saw the video and you're like, oh, that's bad. Not super surprising, it's Millwall. But oh, that's bad. And then, like, I don't know. I think we all were just naive to think, like, well, obviously, like, the club and any other official entities will just address this in the way we've seen this, any kind of racist activity from supporters in the past. But we didn't get any of that. We didn't get any of that, and it was so baffling. Again, we shouldn't be overly surprised, but it was so baffling to just see on the ground level it being universally explained away, basically.
Yeah. From the fans, from the club, from pretty much everyone involved in the situation, it just was a really bad look, and no one could seem to get out of their own way and not trip over their own feet.
My winner, you kind of mentioned it a bit ago. MLS, like, whew, they dodged a bullet there. They could have got a not so great matchup. They could have got Minnesota and Columbus, just flyover country versus flyover country. That would have been bad. But instead they got one of their historic clubs that they may or may not have tried to kill a couple years ago, and that one of their perennial darlings, that is Seattle and Seattle Sounders and all the things that come with it. Like it or hate it, it's good they're good business for MLS. So MLS is happy about it. So, hey, good job, MLS. You got a matchup that actually is going to be, it's going to work for you.
Yeah, definitely a matchup that the home office would have preferred. I do think, Minnesota Columbus would have been super interesting for narrative reasons.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
been a lot of interesting stuff, and I think the match itself would have been interesting. But yeah, from a marketability standpoint, getting one of those coastal big time cities in the equation was something the league desperately needed. I guess that means I'm going to be wrapping things up with my winner this week. A bit of a hard week to pick a winner. Obviously lots of exciting things happening on the domestic side of things. Lots of exciting things going down over in Europe. But I'm going to focus on Americans playing in Europe and just the continued progress here. And I'm going to go ahead and just give it to Weston McKennie as kind of the crown bearer of this amazing American movement that we're seeing over in Europe right now with these players breaking into these big teams and, getting these big moments to shine in big stages is what we need our national team players to be doing, and they are rising to the occasion. And a guy like Weston McKennie, who probably wasn't the most fancied of our bright generation of youngsters, getting to have this spotlight on him is a really, really cool experience. So, I'm giving it to Weston as well as all the other Americans who are shining brightly over in the European big stage.
Yeah, I mean, Saturday alone we had Gio at Dortmund scoring a goal, Weston at Juve scoring a goal, and Pulisic at Chelsea scoring a goal. So three players in three big clubs in three different leagues scoring goals within 2 hours of each other.
Wild times in American soccer. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's show, I think.
Yeah. That'll do it.
All right. Thanks as always for listening along. If you want to get involved, Jeremy's at Jeremy Lance on Twitter. I am at Wrong Side of Pond. Until we talk again next time. See you, folks.
Bye.
Now you say that you've never seen the snow. Guess I don't remember.